The wagon looked dead long before Daniel Reed reached it, and the silence around it felt wrong, like the desert itself was holding its breath. The smell of smoke and blood rode the wind as he guided his horse down into the dry arroyo. One broken wheel leaned against the ground, and two missionaries lay still beside the wagon, their eyes open to a sky that no longer mattered to them. Daniel slid off his horse, rifle ready, scanning the rocks. Nothing moved. Whoever attacked them was gone. Bandits, most likely. Apaches would have taken the animals. These mules were left slaughtered in their harness. He searched the wreck, expecting nothing more than looted supplies. Then he heard it. A faint scraping sound, like metal dragging across stone. Moving quietly around the back of the wagon, Daniel froze. A young Apache woman lay chained to the rear axle. The iron cuff cut deep into her ankle. Dried blood streaked her forehead, and her torn dress hung loosely over a thin, battered body. Fear filled her dark eyes when she saw him. She tried to crawl away, but the chain snapped her back. Daniel lowered his rifle slowly. He had seen fear like that before, in war, in places where people stopped being human and became prey. He offered her water first, stepping back so she could see he meant no harm. Her shaking hands grabbed the canteen, and she drank like someone returning from death itself. The chain took nearly half an hour to file through. Each scrape made her flinch, expecting pain. When the metal finally snapped, she stared at the broken link as if freedom made no sense to her. Daniel turned away, giving her space. After a long time, she stood, bare feet bleeding, body trembling. She looked at the empty desert around them. There was nowhere safe to go. "You come with me," Daniel told her quietly, "or you die out here." She didn't understand his words, but she understood his meaning. Slowly, she walked to his horse. He lifted her into the saddle, wrapping her in a blanket, and rode toward his lonely mountain homestead. His cabin stood far from town, tucked between pines where few travelers ever passed. It was a place built for forgetting. Since his wife and newborn daughter died 5 years earlier, Daniel lived there alone, haunted by silence. The girl watched everything when he brought her inside: the locked rifle rack, the bolted door, the narrow space. She looked like an animal measuring a cage. He cleaned the cut on her head while she flinched at every touch. He fed her thin cornmeal porridge. When night came, he offered her the only cot. She refused and slept outside on the freezing porch instead. By dawn, fever had taken her. Daniel carried her inside, wrapped her in blankets, and spent 4 days fighting the sickness beside her bed. She woke screaming from nightmares in a language he didn't know. He calmed her with quiet words until exhaustion pulled her back to sleep. When the fever broke, suspicion still filled her eyes, but something had changed. She no longer looked ready to run at every movement. Daniel built her a small room off the back porch with its own door and inside latch so she would feel safe. He left food where she could take it without facing him. Soap, a comb, a warm shawl, as small gifts that asked for nothing in return. Winter came hard. Snow buried the valley, and survival meant constant work. One morning she appeared beside him as he split wood and pointed at the axe. "Teach," she said, the first word he heard from her. She learned quickly. She copied everything: fixing fences, grinding corn, banking fires, watching his hands with sharp focus. Slowly, their silence became shared instead of fearful. One stormy night, he let her warm herself by his cabin fire. She crawled near his chair and traced a scar on his hand left from the war. Her touch startled him more than gunfire ever had. "Why?" she asked softly. "Does your heart sleep alone?" The question struck deep. Daniel pulled away, unable to answer. Memories of his dead wife still cut too sharply. He sent her back to her room, but her words followed him into uneasy sleep. As winter softened into spring, her curiosity grew. She studied everything about him, even the differences between them. One afternoon, she surprised him while he worked shirtless, her gaze focused on his chest. "White women want babies because men are strong?" she asked plainly. Daniel nearly dropped his tools. Her questions carried no shame, only honest confusion about a world she was trying to understand. He told her children came from love, not strength alone. She repeated the word quietly, testing its meaning. Their closeness grew without either of them planning it. Yet Daniel kept distance, afraid of crossing lines he believed must remain untouched. She was young, wounded, and learning safety for the first time. He refused to become another man who took something from her. But then one violent spring storm changed everything. Thunder shook the cabin, sending her running to his bed in terror. He held her until the shaking stopped, like comforting a frightened child. But when fear faded, she turned in his arms and whispered that she wanted to feel what women feel. Warmth, safety, something real. Daniel stopped her gently. He told her she deserved choice, not confusion born from fear. She retreated to her room without argument, but the silence between them changed forever. The next morning, she emerged with her hair braided in the style of married Apache women. She never explained it. She simply worked beside him as usual, calm and certain. Daniel pretended not to notice, yet her quiet declaration followed him through every chore. The lonely cabin no longer belonged to one broken man, and it belonged to both of them now. And neither of them yet understood how much trouble that shared life would soon bring. Spring settled over the valley, and the snow melted into cold, rushing streams that cut through the high desert. Life at the cabin slowly felt normal, almost peaceful. Daniel and Tien worked side by side from sunrise to sunset. They repaired fences, planted corn, and hunted together in the hills. The fear that once filled her eyes faded, replaced by quiet confidence. But peace in the frontier never lasted long. Supplies ran low, and Daniel knew he had to ride to Santa Fe. Salt, coffee, sedum, and ammunition could not wait. He saddled Sully at dawn, his stomach tight with unease. Leaving Tien alone felt wrong, but the trip was necessary. Santa Fe was crowded when he arrived. Wagons filled the plaza. The traders shouted prices, and ranch hands leaned against storefronts swapping stories. But when Daniel stepped into the general store, the talking stopped. Men stared. Rumors had spread. Clay Hackett, a big ranch hand with a crooked smile and mean eyes, pushed off the wall near the stove. "Heard you ain't living alone no more, Reed." Daniel ignored him and handed his list to the storekeeper. Another man laughed. "They say you stole an Apache girl from a preacher." Daniel's jaw tightened. "My business ain't yours." Hackett stepped closer. "Word is you're keeping her up there for yourself. Ain't right, keeping a Christian girl like that." Daniel turned slowly. She was chained to a wagon, half dead. That preacher wasn't saving her. Hackett spat tobacco on the floor. "She's property. Oh, and you're no better than a savage for keeping her." Then he made the mistake. "Guess after your half-breed wife died, you needed another one." Daniel moved before he even thought. His fist crashed into Hackett's jaw, dropping the big man into a barrel behind him. Another ranch hand lunged, and Daniel drove his elbow into the man's face. The store exploded into chaos. Sacks of flour bursting, jars crashing, men shouting. Seconds later, 3 men lay on the floor groaning, and Daniel stood bleeding from split knuckles, breathing hard. He tossed money on the counter. For the supplies and the mess. Then he leaned down to Hackett, who struggled to stand. "If you or any man you know comes near my land," Daniel said quietly, "I'll put you in the ground." He rode home with bruised ribs and a swelling eye, but the fight weighed heavier than the pain. He had drawn attention, and attention on the frontier brought danger. Tien waited on the porch when he arrived. She saw the blood on his hands and the bruising on his face. She said nothing. Instead, she brought water and cloth, cleaning his wounds with gentle care. Her hands trembled with anger. "No one," she whispered, "ever bled for me." Something shifted in Daniel's chest when she said it. He realized he was the first man in her life who had fought to protect her instead of hurt her. That night, her nightmares returned. Daniel woke to her screaming in the small back room. She fought invisible enemies, trapped in memories of soldiers in chains. He rushed to her, holding her until she recognized him. Her body shook as grief finally poured out of her. He carried her to his bed so she would not be alone. "Don't go," she begged, clutching his arm. So he stayed, holding her until she slept. The line between protector and partner quietly fading in the dark. Days later, something changed again. Daniel walked into the cabin to find Tien grinding corn barefoot, wearing one of his oversized shirts. She hummed softly, her face peaceful. When she smiled at him, the loneliness he carried for years cracked open. He stepped close, brushing her hair aside. She leaned into his touch. "So," she asked quietly, her eyes searching his, "white people make children this way?" The innocence of the question stole his breath. She wasn't teasing. She truly wanted to understand family, warmth, belonging. "Part of it," he answered gently. She met his gaze, serious and certain. "Can I try too?" Daniel hesitated, fear and longing battling inside him. But this time, her choice was clear. No fear, no confusion, only trust. He asked if she was sure. She placed her hand on his cheek. "I am sure." Their first joining was awkward and tender, filled with careful touches and whispered reassurance. For both of them, it was less about passion and more about healing wounds left by loss and violence. Afterward, she lay against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. "That is warm," she whispered. From then on, she slept beside him. They shared morning coffee, evening work, and quiet lessons, as Daniel taught her to read simple English words while she sang songs from her people. For the first time in years, Daniel felt alive. Then summer brought news neither of them expected. Tien began to grow tired easily. Food smells made her sick. One night she woke him, describing a dream where a deer walked beside her instead of running away. Daniel's heart pounded as realization dawned. Her monthly bleeding had stopped months earlier. He looked at her in the dim firelight. "Tien, I think you're carrying our child." Shock filled her face, followed by a slow smile. "Our baby," she whispered. Joy hit Daniel hard, followed instantly by fear. A child born of a white man and an Apache woman would face a cruel world, and he knew the men in town would not forget their fight. His fears proved true sooner than expected. When Daniel rode into Santa Fe again for supplies, he met Reverend Pike, the same preacher who once chained Tien to his wagon. The man claimed legal papers declaring Tien property of the mission. Sheriff Brody admitted the papers looked official, and Pike promised he would come to claim her. Daniel rode home in a panic, telling Tien they had to flee into the mountains. But she stood in the doorway, looking at the cabin, the fields, the life they built. "No," she said calmly, "I will not be stolen again. This is our place now." Her courage steadied him. Instead of running, Daniel prepared to fight. He cleared shooting lanes, hid rifles, and taught Tien how to use his pistol if needed. 3 mornings later, she spotted riders coming over the ridge. She fired the warning shot. And then she ran. But this time, the men chasing her were faster, and Daniel was not there to stop them. Tien ran through the trees, her bare feet slipping on pine needles as shouts and pounding hooves closed behind her. Panic tried to pull her back into old nightmares, but this time she fought it. She clutched the small pistol Daniel had given her, remembering his words. Run, hide, survive. A rider cut across her path. Clay Hackett jumped from his horse and slammed into her, driving her into the ground. His weight crushed the air from her lungs as his hands grabbed for her wrists. "Hold still," he snarled. "You're coming back." Tien struggled, terror flashing through her, memories of soldiers and chains flooding back. But something inside her refused to break. Her hand slipped to her waistband, where her small knife still hid. And in one desperate motion, she slashed upward. Hackett screamed and rolled away, blood pouring from his torn cheek. Tien scrambled free and bolted into the brush again. Behind her, men cursed and chased. Down in the canyon, Daniel heard the rifle shot. The sound froze his blood. He dropped the water buckets and sprinted uphill, fear at burning in his chest. She had seen them. They were already there. He climbed fast, cutting through the trees with the speed of a hunted animal. Shouting echoed ahead. He knew where she would run. The ledges above the canyon, a dead end. He reached the rocks just as 2 men cornered her. Tien stood on a narrow ledge, a sheer drop behind her. Knife in hand, eyes wild but unbroken. One man began climbing toward her. Daniel raised his rifle and fired. The shot echoed through the canyon. The climber jerked, and then fell backward, tumbling down the rocks. The second man spun, reaching for his pistol. Daniel fired again. The man collapsed into the dirt. Silence followed, broken only by distant shouting. Reverend Pike appeared on the trail, fury twisting his thin face. "You murderer!" the preacher screamed. Daniel stepped from the trees, rifle steady. "You came for her. She is church property." Daniel's eyes hardened. "She's my wife." Hoofbeats thundered as Sheriff Brody and 2 deputies arrived, drawn by the gunfire. They took in the bodies, Pike's rage, Daniel's steady aim, and Tien climbing down from the rocks. Her dress was torn. Blood smeared her arm, but her back was straight. She stepped beside Daniel and faced the sheriff. "Reverend Pike is a liar," she said clearly. The deputies stared. Her English was sharp now, but practiced and certain. "He bought me, sold me, chained me. These men came to steal me again. Daniel saved me." Pike sputtered, but his righteous mask had shattered. The sheriff's expression hardened. "Reverend," Brody said, "you're under arrest." As deputies dragged Pike away, Brody sighed at Daniel. "This will follow you, Reed." Daniel looked at Tien, leaning against him, shaking now that danger had passed. "Let it," he said quietly. They buried the dead far from the cabin. Life slowly settled again, though Daniel never fully relaxed. Danger had touched his home once. It could again. But something stronger grew in its place. Tien's pregnancy became impossible to hide. Her belly rounded, and Daniel's fear slowly turned into wonder. He worked harder than ever, expanding the cabin, building a proper room for the child. But in the evenings, Tien sang songs of her people, while Daniel carved a cradle from pale aspen wood. He made small toys, too, rough animals lined on the windowsill, waiting for small hands. She taught him lullabies. He butchered the words, making her laugh until tears filled her eyes. The guilt he once carried for his lost wife eased when Tien placed a small shell necklace on the grave and told him he was allowed to live again. Summer faded. Leave turned gold, and one violent October night, as thunder shook the mountains, Tien's labor began. Fear clawed at Daniel as memories of his first loss returned. Hours passed in pain and struggle while the storm raged outside. At last, just before dawn, a cry rose above the thunder. A baby girl. Daniel held the tiny, furious life in trembling hands before laying her on Tien's chest. Tears streamed down his face as relief and joy overwhelmed years of grief. They named her Nantani. She brings light. Winter came gently that year. The cabin filled with new sounds, baby laughter, soft singing, the quiet peace of a family that fought hard to exist. One spring afternoon, they sat by the creek beneath a cottonwood tree. Nantani slept in Tien's arms, while Daniel leaned behind them, his arms wrapped around both. As Tien studied the child's dark hair and pale gray eyes, she looked back at Daniel with a soft smile. "So," she whispered thoughtfully, remembering the girl she once was. "This is how white people make children." Daniel smiled and kissed the top of her head. "No," he murmured. "We made her together,